This is the Chaos Community Broadcast, a show about failures and how to navigate complex socio-technical systems so you can surf the chaos instead of succumbing to it. For recording of this broadcast, as well as all of our previous episodes, please go to chaos.community in your web browser of choice. I'm your host, James Wickett.
And I'm your other host, Casey Rosenthal.
Well, today we're joined by Nora Jones, and because we're continuing our series on the book Chaos Engineering, System Resiliency in Practice. Nora is a co-author of the book, and she also wrote the chapter Creating Foresight. And she's a CEO and co-founder of Jeli. So Nora, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on being published, and it's nice to finally meet you in person, Nora.
Yeah, likewise. Nice to meet you in person too.
So I know it's going to come up, so let's just get this question out of the way. Your name is Nora Jones. I'm sure you get asked this all the time about your name. Is there any relation to Indiana?
No relation to Indiana, no.
Told you, James. Okay, if I could take you back to the year MMXVII, November 30th, MGM Grand Arena in Vegas, the AWS reInvent conference. There were 40,000 people in the audience, another 60,000 people watching remotely, and you had the stage. You spoke about the journey of chaos engineering sophistication, the forces of chaos. How did you get to that stage? What was your journey to end up there?
I was working at a company called Jet.com that had just launched in 2015. They were an e-commerce website, and their marketing team was doing a phenomenal job, but as with any good problem, you need to keep up with the tech, and so we were having a lot of incidents, right? We needed to meet the demand that was coming to the website, and we were meeting almost every morning to talk about the previous night's incident. So at that point, we had talked about just trying some new techniques. I came across Netflix's Chaos Monkey, and I started implementing a version of that at Jet.com. It went really interestingly. I thought I was making a tool, and slowly but surely I realized it was a cultural shift, actually. And the tool was just kind of a catalyst for that. So at that point, I had stayed for a little while. I was leading developer productivity and developer tools there. And I went over to Netflix for a couple years after that, where I was on the chaos engineering team with Casey, although this is the first time we've met in person. And
interesting.
Yeah, interesting. And then was building tooling there for a little while, and that's where I did the reInvent talk in 2017. But my journey's changed a lot since then. My thoughts have evolved a lot since then, even as well. But it's a pretty fascinating field, and I think it's going to keep evolving too.
You mentioned you worked on the chaos engineering team at Netflix, which I believe I managed. Was I the worst manager you've ever had?
No.
See, James?
I'm surprised by that.
So, yeah, I've heard of Jet, which you mentioned. James and I were talking about this last week. It was acquired by Walmart and then discarded. Comforting to know that even Walmart sometimes regrets what it buys at Walmart. But I don't often use the word brilliant, except in self-affirmation. But in less than 5 years, you've gone from Jet to Netflix to Slack. Now you run a VC-backed startup. Is there, if you could be self-reflective for a moment, is there anything that you would attribute your success to, versus other people who have had the same advantages? And obviously we live in a biased system towards privilege. But is there anything in particular about your outlook on software, your understanding of where the industry is, that you feel has contributed to your success?
I mean, I've been so lucky to work with amazing people at each company I've been at. I mean, Jet was kind of a startup environment. I was in hardware before Jet, still focused on reliability, but it was a different journey for me. And I was able to take some of the same theories and approaches towards hardware reliability. And I was actually surprised how much it applied towards software as well. And honestly, just collaborating and getting to know teammates. Like one of the things, so I studied computer engineering back when I went to school. And one of the things I really disliked about the major was how individual it was, you know, how I felt that it could be a lot more collaborative. I felt that we were going to build better things if we were working together, if we were talking. And I think sometimes the software industry falls into that trap as well, where you put your headphones on and you just code all day. And I think actually sitting down and working with my coworkers and building reliability tools and really thinking about the business impacts of things has just completely changed my viewpoint, and, you know, has really helped me along this journey. Yeah, I'm still going, but it's been so fun. Yeah, it's really just the people.
And so that perspective of, you know, in the language of the field, you know, viewing it more as the or at least being open to the socio part of the socio-technical system. How much of that was influenced? You're still in the master's program at Lund University?
Yeah, I am still in it.
How much of that has changed your thinking?
It changed my world. I mean, like, it was stuff that I knew and felt, and then I came into that first week of class and I felt like I could actually put theories and research and practical applications behind stuff I was thinking and feeling all along. And I just feel like the software industry has so much ahead of it in terms of reliability, in terms of how we think about making the internet, you know, a place folks can trust from a reliability perspective and totally understand the impacts of what we're building as software engineers, not only to society, but to our businesses.
This has been something that I've been kind of thinking about and wondering about. Maybe you could kind of speak to this. It's like, we have Netflix is kind of this place that has really been a launching pad for a lot of interesting startups. And we see that over the years, like both Casey and Nora, yourself, like both of y'all have startups coming out of this field. What made Netflix particularly successful in being able to help people see their vision, being able to kind of tackle these problems and then spread this to the wider audience?
Casey, do you want to take that first?
No, I don't recall being there.
I think you said earlier you had recalled being there. Netflix was an amazing place to work in a lot of different ways. They really share freedom and responsibility, and so you can work on what you want to work on, but you have to be able to back it up. You have to be able to own it. You have to be able to share it. One of the things that was really great for me at Netflix, although sometimes it could be a lot, was folks in the reliability organization had to play every single role. I had to be a product manager. I had to be a designer. I had to be a back-end engineer. I had to be a front-end engineer. I had to be an internal evangelist. And I got good at a bunch of those different skill sets just by being there. And I think it was part of the Netflix culture that really helped with that. But a lot of those skill sets helped me find my way into starting my own company as well. And so I'm so grateful for that experience.
Yeah, just as an outsider looking in at Netflix, Blockbuster 2.0, how did it become the place that generated all this? Like, you wouldn't have suspected that if you were to write this down in a book. You wouldn't have thought, oh, that's the place where innovation is going to come from. And in both of your books, Chaos Engineering, it had that a lot of those pieces. But I think that's kind of hearing you talk about that is really helpful. But now I'd like to move to a word from our sponsor. The Chaos Community Broadcast thanks our advertiser, La France Fomite Corporation Fire Extinguishers. Fire, an incident or disaster. Fire plays no favorites. It is no respecter of persons or property. It burns wherever it can reach, yet fire may be almost harmless when it starts. Like any tiny flame on a match, you're so apt to toss away. Everywhere the menacing finger of fire needs merely the encouragement of carelessness or accident to wreck a business, despite fire insurance. The uninsurable losses are staggering losses. Your business can be protected against fire by the proper type of extinguishers, ready to make your every fire an incident in the day's work. LaFrance and Fomite Protection, an engineering service against fire. Casey, we gotta work on these.
Yeah, that was.
Where are you advertising these sponsorship requests?
It's a good question. Where do we find these? I guess I find most of them in the Pennywise. I think that was a good one though. That reminds me of when I was back in the Twin Cities when they first rolled out the Gamewell Firealarm telegraph system. Do you remember that? Remember those? You would pull the lever once, and then they would open up, and you pull the other lever, and the fire department shows up. And I don't want to date myself, but back then it was a novelty. So of course the kids would want to see the fire trucks, so they do it and set the alarm off, and the fire trucks would show up. And then Minneapolis, I guess, they passed an ordinance that you couldn't, if you did that and there wasn't an actual fire, you'd get fined. So of course the kids were smart, so they do it, they'd set off the alarm, and then they'd look around for something to light on fire so that they didn't have to pay the fine. Of course, I don't. They've probably taken all those Gamewell boxes down by now. I don't know if Minneapolis still has a problem with fires, but unintended consequences of automation. Smart kids. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so in the book, you talk about. I'm sorry, it's really difficult to work with these uncomfortable shoes. James, can you get me a pair of good studio shoes? Nora, do you want a good pair of studio shoes? Can you Postmates or courier a pair of comfortable studio shoes? That'd be great.
No, Casey, that's not something I do. No.
Surprised you do anything around here. So in the book you talk about.
Sorry about that, Nora. He gets like that sometimes.
In the book, you talk about using
the showbiz is getting to him.
James, Milton once said to me, "Never apologize for somebody else's free will." In the book, you talk about using a facilitator to investigate an incident, much like is done in other high-stakes industries, medicine, aviation, and maritime. Can you explain? Can you explain how that relates to chaos engineering and some of your work in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Netflix, we had built a really great system, and we could do a lot of things. Like we could inject failure safely in production. But we had this giant form for folks to fill out if they wanted to do it. And it was a pretty daunting form. And it's not like folks were thinking about doing chaos experiments all the time, unless they were the four of us on this team. We were thinking about it all the time. They were thinking about it maybe once every few months. And so seeing a giant form asking what business metric you want to impact can be kind of scary for folks apparently. And so doing some facilitation techniques at Netflix was really helpful, like talking to teams and asking what kept them up at night. And if you actually had time, talking to folks individually and seeing how mental models differ between folks on the same team, seeing how mental models differ between different tenures on the same team, different roles on the same team, different pieces of the system on the same team. Like a really good facilitator can extract that out of folks and find those gaps. So when I went to Slack, we had been rolling out Envoy, and folks wanted to do some chaos experiments on it. And so I started asking the questions I had put in the chaos book, right? And I really grouped with people on the team. We filled out a lot of pre-work to be able to run the chaos experiment. And by the time we got about 75% through facilitating the experiment and preparing for it, we realized we weren't actually ready to roll it out. And we didn't even need to run the chaos experiment to know that. It was just asking those questions.
You said a really good facilitator can pull those things out. How does one become a really good facilitator?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not being the expert, but being able to dig into things in different words that someone tells you about a situation. So if they're saying, yeah, this part of the system is very flaky, not being like, oh yeah, I know that tipped over last night, even though you do know, asking them, oh, what do you mean it's flaky? Can you elaborate on what that word means? And I know that can be kind of awkward, especially with folks that you've worked with for 3 years. I remember in a post-incident review once, I was asking someone what tool they used to make a configuration change. And they were like, Nora, I made a change with you in this system like a couple weeks ago. Like, they were just looking at me. I'm like, well, humor me for a second. And I think being a good facilitator is all about being able to kind of remove that ego and ask some of the silly questions that you might know the answers to, but it's really not about the canonical answer, right? It's about how someone else views the system, because then you can see the gaps between how they view the system, maybe how you view the system, maybe how other people in the organization are viewing that system. And you get to see how you actually work versus how you think you work as an organization. It kind of bubbles things up to the surface that folks have maybe been ignoring, that folks didn't actually know exist, and it creates learning opportunities in the organization.
It's an interesting answer. The canonical answer is actually read the book, but that was an interesting answer.
Yes, I put a large set of questions in the book to help you become a facilitator.
Let's remind all listeners to, if you want those access to those questions and much more, get the Chaos Engineering book.
You'll never believe question 7. It's wild.
James, do you want to introduce the next section here?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it is now Chaos Libs time. This is a fun-filled, very exciting lightning fill-in-the-blank game. Casey's going to read, and just as Nora, you just need to respond as fast as you possibly can. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right.
Continuous.
Verification.
Ironies of
Automation.
Human
Factories.
it could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
Working with Casey was
Fascinating.
Experiment.
Design.
Game.
Days.
Peanut butter and
Jeli.
James, how did she score?
Wow, that was great. I think that's one of our all-time highs, 37 points so far. Good job. Well, I think that's time's up on that one.
Was there a prize for that? I'm still waiting for my shoes.
Yep, we have some questions. Let's bring in question caller number 1.
Hi all, thanks for taking my call. I have a question about tooling with respect to inducing failure. My current provider has a suite of products. You may be familiar with their line, Acme. I'm stuck between choosing the explosive tennis balls and the rocket-powered roller skates. I'm currently chasing a roadrunner off a cliff, so I'll take my answer off air.
But James, that feels like was that a prank call? Do we have any other callers?
We do have a couple other questions. Let's
see if we can bring in another caller.
Hi, Nora. Question for you. Yeah, so what is it we can learn from chaos engineering that we can't already learn from a well-executed root cause analysis?
Excellent question.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think they're two very different things. A well-executed root cause analysis, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I would say that there are well-executed post-incident learnings that you can do, but they're two separate things. Chaos engineering is proactively looking at things, and I think they're inextricably linked. I like to think of them as sort of a feedback loop. You kind of can't do one without the other. You need to be able to learn from your incidents, right? And so you can do different chaos experiments. You can do better chaos experiments. You can know where to experiment, who to bring into the room, if you should fix it or not. Those kinds of things can't be totally learned without learning from your incidents first. But I wouldn't call that a well-executed root cause analysis, but that's not for today.
Maybe we should just execute our root cause analysis better.
Yeah, maybe.
Any other callers on the line?
No, yep, we have one last caller. Let's bring them in.
Hi, long-time caller, first-time listener. My question is, what's the best way to adapt a post-mortem template for use with chaos experiments?
Yeah, there's a few different ways I would suggest that answer. I think you can look at a post-incident template and also look for opportunities to do chaos experiments in the future. Like, look at what surprised us during the incident. Look at who we needed to rely upon that we weren't sure we needed to rely upon, what parts of the system we needed to rely upon. And you can use that to feed into future chaos experiments. But you can also use some guides with chaos experiments too, like what are our expectations with this experiment? What are our hypotheses? Who do we need to tell about this experiment? When should we run it? Why does it matter when we run it? I think the two, I would call them guides rather than templates so that folks don't feel like they have to stick to them. But I think, again, those two worlds are fairly linked, and they can be used as a feedback cycle into others. I would recommend mentioning chaos experiments in post-incident guides, and I would recommend mentioning incidents in chaos experiment guides as well, because that will help you see over time how you're actually doing, which chaos experiments you've run, which incidents have been associated with them, what the impacts of those incidents were.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Nora. Best of luck to you at Jeli. And I hope people read your book so that they don't mislearn the things that they should have learned because they didn't learn how to learn from incidents.
I hope they read your book too, Casey.
Well, that concludes our show. As always, if you would like past broadcasts, you can go to chaos.community in the web browser of your choice. Ending transmission now.